So if you're like me, you probably have a pretty good DSLR that you shoot your Lego stop motion videos with, but the problem is the lens doesn't focus close enough for you to get really good close-up shots. Well, for that, you need this guy right here. So when I originally bought my Canon Rebel T6, I bought it in a kit with a lens and a tripod and a bunch of other junk. And I say junk because it's a bunch of cheap stuff that comes with your camera. It's not actually junk, but it was definitely stuff that I didn't really need to buy with the camera, you know, pay the extra money to get all this random stuff. But what I did get in that kit is something that I don't think I'll ever regret getting. It's this little extension lens right here by Exit? I think that's what it's called. Anyways, this is a Pro Series 0.43 times high definition AF wide angle lens 58 millimeters. But with all those words, it's not really that expensive. It's actually only $11.23 as of now. And so, in that kit with all of the parts, I had this. And they actually made a mistake and sent me 2 of these. So I have 2 of these little things, and they're macro, supposed to be macro extensions for the front of your lens that would just, you know, screw on, like that. And they do something like that. But they sent me 2, and I was like, okay, that's random. So if you're gonna buy a camera, don't buy that type of kit. You're really not gonna get what you need. But I didn't know at the time. I spent a lot of extra money on my camera. But, oh well, I already bought it, it's okay. And you might be wondering, how did you get this to look like this? Well, later I discovered that you can actually unscrew. Some part of me feels like if this was a Pro Series 0.43 times high definition AF wide angle lens 58 millimeters, it probably wouldn't unscrew. But it was only $11, so what can you expect? Anyways, I discovered that these 2 parts can unscrew from each other, and I discovered that when I was trying to pull off an over-tightened lens cap. So, I now have this. This is the version 2.0 of the Exit Pro Series blah 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 macro lens, and it is now very tiny. And so I kind of pull this off and I'm like, oh, I didn't mean to do that, so I put it back on. And then a couple months go by and I come back and I do it again, and I think, could this go on the front of your camera? And so the problem with this big lens right here is that it is supposed to, you know, make your photos look more macro. It kind of zooms in a little bit, you know. It's supposed to make it look macro, but the problem is that it doesn't focus as closely as I would have thought. And so those photos from this whole lens kind of look like this. But if you take it apart, you get photos that look more like this. Now that's a huge difference. That's almost, I don't know how close it was, but it was quite a bit closer that I could get with just the little part of the lens. And keep in mind, this is only $10. You don't even need to spend that much money to get insane macro photography. And I have this other lens over here, this 75 to 300 millimeter lens, and I will screw the little attachment onto the top of it eventually. Oh, there we go. This is how it goes on, and you can see it's quite a bit smaller than having this whole thing on, and it takes better shots. Mostly. The problem with only having this little tiny bit is that when you focus, you can't focus on anything far away, which you can do with this. But you can get really close up with this lens, with this little attachment, which does help if you want to get close-up shots. And so I'm going to go out and shoot some videos and photos with the lens on this camera, and we'll even try this big 75 to 300 millimeter lens and see how it turns out. So as you can see, those shots from this tiny $11 lens are insane. You can get really close up, and especially if you put it on the zoom lens, the 75 to 300 millimeter lens, it zooms up so close. Although, if you are zooming up this close, you do have to be careful. You do run into the problem of having a very hard time focusing on anything. And so that's why this is a cheap way to have a macro lens. It doesn't really do well with autofocus, and it doesn't focus on anything far away, but it does give you a really close-up shot to whatever you're trying to shoot. And so if you come back from shooting with this lens, you can attach the little lens cap that comes with it onto the back, and then if you want to cover the other side to kind of keep it a little separate and keep it clean, then you can just use just a 58 millimeter lens cap, and it should work going onto the front of the macro extension lens. I also really like the bokeh on this lens. It creates some really nice blurry background, but again, that does make it harder to focus. And if you want to see some more tutorials on stop motion and Lego stop motion, you can click one of the videos on the screen. If you don't want to miss out on any further videos, subscribe by hitting the logo. That's all for now, guys, and I'll see you next time on Learning Curve Tech.